The year was 1963. It was a cool August night. The English countryside seemed plunged into deep darkness. The Royal Mail train, on its way from London to Scotland, was on its usual route. It was 3 a.m. The people working on the train thought they were on a routine shift because they had made hundreds of trouble-free trips on the same route, hundreds of times. But what they didn't know was that tonight would be like no other night. Everything was going to be very different. The engineers had traveled this route hundreds of times, but a group of men waiting outside in the darkness knew the routes and couldn't wait to commit one of history's greatest crimes. A team of 15 men, months of preparation and millions in a single night, out of sight of the engineers. Waiting for the train to pass, the thieves were waiting for the right moment. Their leader, Bruce Reynolds, and his team kept their eyes on the signal light. That light was the team's most important weapon. It would stop the train, whose signaling had been disrupted by the team, and a red light flashed in front of the train. The engineers knew that the red light was not supposed to be on, and they thought something was wrong, so they hit the brakes in surprise and fear. And now it was the thieves' turn, and they made their move. So, how did it happen? How did the detectives unravel this seemingly perfect plan? Was the Great Train Robbery really a perfect robbery? Now we're going to delve into all the details of this legendary heist. Months before the night of the robbery, the team led by Bruce Reynolds spent months planning to make this operation a success. This was not going to be an ordinary heist. It was going to take a very high-level operation to outwit the cops, stop the train, and steal the biggest prize, millions of dollars. Professional criminals from across the UK came together. They were all masters in their field, and all with the sole aim of smuggling millions off a train to stop a Royal Mail train with millions of pounds and steal the money. But first, they had to come up with a detailed plan. For months, in secret meetings, the team worked out the perfect plan. Drawing boards, maps, train routes, safety points. The whole plan was planned down to the last detail. The most critical point was to find the safest and quietest way to stop the train. For this, they recruited a man who was a railroad signal expert. He knew how to manipulate the train signal system. By manipulating the red light, he would force the train to stop. That way, it would only look like a technical problem to the train officials. But in fact, the biggest robbery in history was about to begin. The second stage of the plan was the escape route after the robbery. Once the robbery was successful, they needed to move millions of pounds to a safe place. So an abandoned farmhouse was arranged. They would create a hideout that the cops couldn't trace. At 3 a.m., the robbers were on the move. They slipped silently through dense woodland to reach the rail line in rural Buckinghamshire. And bingo, there stood the metal giant, the Royal Mail train, moving through the darkness of the night. The crew's most critical move was to stop the train safely. Having previously sabotaged the signaling system, the team turned on the red signal at the right moment. When Donald Burge, the train's engineer, saw this unexpected light, he immediately applied the brakes. But what he didn't know is that this was no ordinary malfunction. It was much more. As soon as the train stopped, the robbers moved in, moving like shadows in the darkness. They made their way to the engineer's cabin. All they could think about at that moment was the money in the sacks, and this plan seemed perfect and very simple to them. When the robbery team opened the doors of the mail wagons, they saw sacks worth millions of pounds inside. Everything was going according to plan. The sacks were quickly moved out of the wagons, but their time was limited because the slightest mishap could ruin the whole operation. As millions of pounds were being unloaded from the train, a phone rang somewhere in the distance. One of the train attendants noticed the anomaly and alerted the police. But the gang was fast. In just 30 minutes, they had completed the robbery and were on the escape route. As the robbers walked away, they thought they had left almost no clues behind. But when the crime scene was analyzed, detectives had some details to go on. As soon as the robbers had finished with the train, the remaining officials were trying to figure out what was going on. One of them immediately called the station authorities. The Royal Mail train has been robbed. The word soon spread across the UK. It was the biggest robbery in the country, and the clock was ticking for the police. Upon receiving the news of the robbery, the police quickly dispatched teams to the area. Detectives and forensic experts started collecting evidence at the scene. Traces were traced along the tracks. Fingerprints were checked. But what they found was simply shocking. A perfect plan. By morning, Britain's biggest newspapers had already made their headlines. Biggest train robbery in history. Robbers get away with 2.6 million. The media had grasped the scale of the event. and the public was now curious about the details of this massive robbery. Because the robbery was so organized, the police focused on familiar criminal gangs. This is where Bruce Reynolds and his team were first mentioned. Detectives opened old files to look for names that had been involved in similar crimes in the past. Many theories were circulating among the people. Some thought it was not just a robbery, but an operation with deep connections. The detectives denied these allegations, but the press started spinning different stories. Who was really behind this? The robbers had left almost no trace, but investigations revealed that a flashlight and mask used on the train had been left at the scene. This was to be the most critical clue the police had. The next step: follow the clues. After the robbers left, police began a thorough investigation at the scene. The tracks revealed a carton of cigarettes, a flashlight, and a pair of gloves. Despite fingerprint analysis, the criminals' usage of gloves prevented a straight match. However, investigators were aware that these minor hints would be crucial to uncovering the truth. Based on prior instances of similar crimes, the police have put together a list of suspects. Bruce Reynolds was among the most well-known. He has connections to smugglers and had previously plotted other large thefts. Investigators started tracking Reynolds' crew and financial activities. Police found an abandoned farmhouse that the criminals had used to conceal the money and temporarily avoid detection as the inquiry went on. They discovered a map, a cigarette ashtray, and boot prints that were still muddy. Although the group had long since left, they had left some hints in their hurry. Police started using listening equipment and radio signal tracking systems to track the thieves. At the time, criminals often communicated with old-style encrypted radio systems. Detectives detected suspicious radio signals coming from certain areas and suspected that the robbers might still be nearby. The first big clue was obtained by tracing the serial numbers of the cash found in one of the robbers' possession during their escape. By tracking cash transactions at specific banks and casinos, detectives began to analyze who spent the stolen money. For the first time, names were becoming clear. The police started organizing operations based on the names identified, but some of the robbers had already disappeared. The button was pressed for the big operation. To match the size of the heist, the British Police Department has put up a team. The case was given to the nation's top detectives and intelligence specialists. The suspects' names started to take shape with the help of the evidence and witness accounts. Police carried out a thorough search of the abandoned farmhouse, one of the robbers' escape points. There were food boxes left behind, cigarette butts, and even a forgotten bank receipt. Detectives knew that these small clues were the missing pieces of a larger ring. Some of the robbers started spending the stolen money. Detectives tracked people who started spending large sums of money in banks and casinos. The serial numbers of the stolen banknotes were traced, and the identities of the suspects became clear. Police investigating the largest heist in British history had their greatest opportunity when they received a tip from an informant. Police received information about a residence that one of the gang members used as a hideout from an anonymous tipster. Investigators believed it to be a criminal headquarters. Detectives raided the residences of suspects who had already been identified. Some of them were discovered in hiding places, while others were apprehended while attempting to flee. During police questioning, the first individual apprehended would divulge some crucial information. The capture of the robbers did not mean the case was complete. The biggest trial in history was about to begin, but there were still questions to be answered. Had all the criminals been caught? Had all the money been found? Or was much of it still hidden? The biggest trial in history was taking place in the London courts. Outside the courthouse, the public and the media gathered. The trial of the century was in the headlines, and everyone was waiting to see how it would turn out. But the trial was going to be difficult because the defendants were as prepared as the police. Prosecutors used evidence gathered from the crime site, concealed money, and bank records to demonstrate the criminals' guilt one by one. However, the attorneys for the thieves contended that some of the evidence had been misconstrued by the police. The case's outcome was unclear because some evidence was not admitted in court. Some defendants entered not guilty pleas throughout the trial, while others attempted to reach agreements in order to receive a lighter penalty. Although they did not specify the precise location, several of the offenders said that the majority of the money was still missing. This prompted some investigators to hypothesize that a portion of the funds might still be concealed. The public was split over the trial. Some said that the perpetrators had carefully planned the slaughter, and that it was an anti-system protest. The police's inability to apprehend additional suspects was condemned by others. Even claims that the robbery was partially supported by government officials began to appear in newspapers. The offenders were given prison terms of 20 to 30 years by the court. However, A few of the robbers were never apprehended. Some of the thieves were believed to have gotten away with it, and none of the money was ever recovered. One of the police's greatest shortcomings is that Bruce Reynolds in particular managed to stay on the run for years. Years after the heist, there are still theories about the missing money and the criminals on the run. The police have done everything they can to unravel the truth, but some secrets remain forever shrouded in darkness. The Great Train Robbery occurred years ago. However, it remains one of the most heinous crimes in British history. Documentaries, books, and even films have been made on it. However, certain components were still lacking. While a lot of persons were apprehended by the police, other culprits were never located. For years, Bruce Reynolds in particular was still at large. Some accounts claim that he and a few of his teammates were able to escape overseas and never came back. Are they still out there, or did they truly vanish? The majority of the $2.6 million that was taken in the heist has never been found. Only a portion of the money was retrieved. According to official documents, the remainder vanished entirely. The big question is, where is it? Various ideas on the robbery have been proposed by insiders and some former accomplices over the years. Some said the money went to certain government officials, while others said the cops covered it up. Has the truth been consigned to history's dusty pages? For years, British police have conducted investigations to find missing criminals, but no matter how hard they searched, some names disappeared, literally without a trace. A major turning point in the history of contemporary crime was the Great Train Robbery. There are still questions though. Has everything been made public, or are some secrets irrevocably lost? What are your thoughts? For more of this type of stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below.